Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, joined by our Tuesday friend, Dan Wetzel. And Dan, I don't want to pretend that we're only friends on Tuesdays, but it's the only time we talk in front of a camera. So welcome back to KOTN.
Thank you, Doug. We're friends all the time. We're friendly here in the North.
We are. See, we stick together. We got to tell the people, you and I met for the first time because the very first job that I had out of college in sports writing, I worked with two of your friends and colleagues who went to college with you. And you were like, hey, I work with these guys. It was a 3-man sports staff. It was me and these two guys from UMass. And it was like, oh, yeah, we got our friend. He works at the Basketball Times. And I was like, oh, yeah, this guy. And like, I think you came and visited. And here we are now.
We played poker, I think.
I think that's right. 60 years later, here we are. That was in 1963. But yeah, I knew you won, Danny boy.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago. Up in the region of Indiana, hanging out.
Yeah. So we aren't just going to tell stories here. We're going to talk about Boston College right off the top because banner. We got a banner. Where's my Boston College banner? Who else? You got a lot of shows, Dan, with Boston College banners, huh? You got
Not too many, but yeah, Eagles are flying, man. The Heights.
We're going to talk about transfer quarterbacks. Then we have a bunch of other guests coming. We're going to talk about Syracuse. We're going to talk about Notre Dame. We're going to talk about Northwestern with guests. I'm going to have the Overrated Southern Team of the Week. Bill Landis will be by with his Punt of the Week and Block of the Week. But we'll start off talking about Boston College. And Dan, you've covered the Patriots a lot over the years. You cover all sports. Bill O'Brien is such a fascinating figure. He was on this show in the offseason, and I just thought it was a great marriage of a guy at a certain time in his life and a school with an opportunity. He was at Ohio State for 3 weeks, and nobody at Ohio State begrudged him this. He's from Boston, and I think he has a chance to, in this final stage of his career, really maybe build something back at Boston College. But the idea that it starts in game one with a win at Florida State is amazing. What did you think of that O'Brien hire when it happened?
I've been saying, I thought it was the best pound for pound, per capita, whatever you want to do, hire of the offseason. Obviously, he's not the number one candidate out there. Alabama went and got Kalen DeBoer off a national title game. But Boston College is not Alabama, which is always going to attract the best candidates. You got a guy who did a very good job in 2 years at Penn State under, unprecedented situation coming off following Joe Paterno and the Sandusky scandal and all of that. Coaches the Houston Texans. Not the best general manager for the Houston Texans. Excellent coach, though. 4 playoff appearances, 2 victories. He's coached under Bill Belichick. He's coached under Nick Saban. He has coached Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young, Super Bowl champ Tom Brady. He has almost 100% name recognition in New England because of his time with the Patriots. Very, very good offensive coordinator in the NFL. It's from Boston, from the Catholic League, St. John's Prep, all of that. And he becomes Boston College's coach. It is the perfect hire. This is a overqualified guy for Boston College. He's not assistant on the way up. He's not someone who's looking, I'm going to grab any job I can get to get out of here. I could totally see if this goes well, Bill O'Brien saying, I'm good here for 10 years or something like that. I think he was a spectacular hire. And then I think you started seeing that Monday night in Tallahassee, the way the team played. It looked like a professional operation. 1 penalty, dominant on both offense and defensive line, very in control. They had an advantage up the middle on offense and just kept running there. Didn't get too cute. Spectacular hire and a spectacular first result in throttling FSU. I don't really care if FSU is not looking too good. You're Boston College. You take this thing and celebrate.
And like the number one overrated storyline of the year has been the defensive line at Florida State. Not that we care here in the North, but like, oh my God. But you got to give credit to this Boston College offensive line. Couple guys back as third-year starters, Drew Kendall and Ozzie Trapillo. Really good. Left tackle Jude Bowery is a third-year guy. That was his first career start. They bumped the left tackle from last year inside because this guy was so ready to play. And then that guy, Logan Taylor, was hurt. And Dwayne Ulrich had to play. And Jack Conley at center is a 6th-year guy. So they've got some veteran guys. And that idea of, I mean, sometimes, Dan, it's like, it's like whatever, coach speak stuff, whatever. But like, this is a stake in the ground. This is the beginning of the Bill O'Brien era. There have to be some high school kids in the northeastern part of the country who watched that game on Monday night and maybe weren't thinking about Boston College before, that are going to give the Eagles a look now and be like, oh yeah, that guy coached Tom Brady. Oh yeah, it's a beautiful campus. Like this is, I don't want to overstate it, but this I think is going to resonate for what's next at BC.
Kendall and Trapillo, first two guys you mentioned from Norwell, Massachusetts, my hometown. So we were, I never thought we would be beating Florida State up, but it happened. They were manhandling him. You don't mess with Norwell. Norwell Clippers are going to come at you. This is undoubtedly a statement. I mean, everyone was watching, and it's not just that he coached Tom Brady. It's that he was an offensive coordinator in the NFL for a long time. And you're not always going to get the great QB recruit. Oh, you can get them at Boston College, but you talk about offensive linemen. You saw those blocking schemes. You saw the defensive line. This guy is going to be able to sell, hey, I can help get you to the pros. You're going to get an elite degree at Boston College. It's an incredible environment. I also think that because of his name and because of the excitement of this game, the one thing BC struggles with, fan engagement, breaking through in a pro sports market, just getting everyone going. And look, Patriots aren't predicted to have this huge season. Maybe you get some more people at the stadium. You get things going a little bit. But you saw what Bill O'Brien wants Boston College football to look like. And Boston College football can be that. They've been dominant in the lines. Kendall and Trapillo, both of their fathers were Boston College stars too. So it's a place that breeds offensive linemen and things like that. It was just a really dynamic victory, an exciting victory. And it was a way to say, look, I'm here.
Yeah,
we're going to be good. You guys know me. People in New England know me as he's probably the most, I don't know, maybe Josh McDaniel, but other than that, he's kind of known as a right-hand man for Bill Belichick on multiple occasions. And so this was a great day for Boston College.
This is an interesting point you make about the Patriots now being the dynasty is way over. Belichick is gone. Well, the Boston College Eagles fill the football vacuum in New England. We'll be having a debate by the end of the year.
No.
Who's the better, Jacoby Brissett or Thomas Castellanos? Who's the better quarterback? I did think this is one of those where in the spring, I was there for a spring practice. This is one of those things. I was going to be on a spring practice tour, Dan, and I was going to hit some of our northern schools. And I went to Boston College football practice. And as I was there, unbeknownst to me, my retina was detaching.
Oh no.
So I was on the field with the Boston College Eagles and my retina detached, and yet Mike Norvell still had a worse time on the field with the Boston College Eagles than I did. But like getting to see that, I was impressed by their skill guys then, but they were talking about this offensive line then, and like the defense was a little bit slower to come around because I think they liked the guys they had up front. But you could feel some of that. But the thing that I was curious about is they have this Grayson James guy who's a transfer quarterback from Florida International. He was actually hurt last night, so he couldn't have played anyway. But I thought he's a little bit more of a traditional drop back passer. And I thought, Castellanos is a really interesting guy, but will Bill O'Brien maybe be inclined to slide toward a more traditional quarterback? And instead, he firmly stood behind Thomas Castellanos, said, he's our guy. When I had him on this offseason, I was like, you playing two quarterbacks? He said, no. Tommy's our guy. And I think that like this is a tip of the cap to a guy who has been around and coached quarterbacks. I wasn't sure what the marriage would be like. Castellanos only threw for 106 yards. He slung it around, but it was a really good working relationship of a guy with a really interesting set of skills, and Bill O'Brien and this offense finding the best way to take advantage of that, which is like, why did I ever think that Bill O'Brien wouldn't figure that out?
Yeah, Castellanos was fantastic last night. Those runs, tough runner. Total dual threat. And I think you agree. It's when you get a veteran coach like that, who's done a little bit of everything and has coached at all these different levels, he's not a system guy. He's not sitting there saying, I have to implement this one system. It's what do I have? What are we going to win with? And he looked at that game last night, and I think he's going to look at this team and say, all right, strengths the offensive line. All right, they're saying Florida State's defensive line is the best in the country. He was not worried about it. And last night, they clearly had an advantage, not just on the offensive line, but in the middle of that offensive line, because they were running ball right up the middle, A gaps, and just getting this done that way. It was right at him. It wasn't just a running attack. It was obviously there was a lot of scrambles and stuff like that, but there were a lot of run plays right up, some pretty sophisticated blocking. And then the defensive line, I think Florida State only had 21 yards rushing.
Yeah.
If you're rushing big and the other team is stopped, you're going to win the game. I mean, it's hard to lose. When you rush for 260 and they rush for 21, you're going to win a lot of football games. So, again, I think this is a perfect marriage for what Boston College can be. I think he's the kind of coach that can do this. I think he can create a lot of interest from people all over the country to look and say, all right, this is what they got going. You were there at BC. Their facilities are terrific. Obviously, the campus is fantastic. You're in Boston. The degree is, very valuable. All those things. It's been a hard go for Boston College athletics, other than hockey and women's lacrosse and a couple things like that, to kind of find their footing, especially in the ACC. They're just such a fish out of water. And where do they fit in modern college football? And we'll see. This is one game, okay?
Yeah.
We'll see how it all plays out. But I am a lot more optimistic about Boston College Eagles now with Bill O'Brien than I was almost with any other coach. Again, that spun my head when they got it. I remember when it was like, oh, they could get Bill O'Brien. And it was like, this is a no-brainer. They were interviewing a bunch of people, and I'm like, boy, I would not pass on this guy because he did a good job at Penn State. And he was a good coach at the Houston Texans. Penn State was
multiple,
4 playoffs, 2 victories.
Yeah.
It was a mess at Penn State. I mean, he walked into, you got to succeed Joe Paterno, right? That's going to be hard no matter what, because it's just everything set for Paterno. But then the way with the Sandusky, and when he took the job, it wasn't as the scope of Sandusky wasn't as known as much. And then it just got way worse. And then you had these unbelievable, the NCAA came in and tried to penalize them like 10 scholarships for 4 years. And I mean, it's really hard to recruit, keep players, all of those things. And he handled that situation really, really well. So I'm glad he's back head coach at college football. Again, you can't really have a better pedigree. If it doesn't work with Bill O'Brien, I don't know what can work.
Yeah. No, and that's been, I compared him to Greg Schiano a million times. And you just think about Matt Rule, Greg Schiano, Bill O'Brien, former NFL head coaches who are coaching Northern college football right now. And it's like, man, these could really be good fits at these places. But at Rutgers, if Schiano can't do it, whoever could. Same thing at Boston College. Schiano, having been there the first time, even deeper roots. But I think they're both in for the long haul. I think they'll both be there until the school says we're done with you. And I think they both might retire at those positions. And it's really good things for those two schools. 263-21 in rushing yards in this game. Kai Robichaux and Trayshawn Ward, really good 1-2 combo behind that offensive line. And Donovan Azaraku and Neto Okpala, 10 pressures on DJ Uiagalelei. So just again, it's one of those things to win, but sort of for Boston College to go physically dominate a team like Florida State is really impressive. And as you look at a completely messed up ACC, Dan, we know Miami looked good in week 1, but otherwise I'd look north. Pitt with Eli Holstein, Syracuse with Kyle McCord and Aronde Gadsden and what Fran Brown is doing there. And now Boston College showing this to 3 Northern schools in the ACC. I think people need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because you looked at it, and I mean, Carolina won in the ACC, but they lose their quarterback. Virginia Tech loses. Florida State looks like a mess. Clemson, who knows? I still think they'll be pretty good. Losing to Georgia is losing to Georgia. But they certainly don't. They may not be an elite national title, but there is some room to go with the teams in the north of the ACC to make a move here and at least have a good season. And get going, even if you don't win it. But I don't know, that was an intriguing team. I loved, they said it on the broadcast where he's just taking a knee. A lot of teams, you see him still running plays up, and it was just a professional looking outfit.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, we're going to win, take a knee, right? NFL doesn't care. You win by 1, you win by 100, doesn't matter. Let's get out of there. The 1 penalty, I think I mentioned, that's it. Controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mean, that's some classic football.
Let's get to transfer quarterbacks, what we want to talk about, because, and I think Thomas Castellanos and DJ Uiagalelei are kind of good examples here. I did the math, Dan. The 68 power conference teams, their week 1 starters at quarterback. Would you like to guess, or maybe you know this, Would you like to guess how many of those quarterbacks were homegrown, having only ever played for the school for which they started, versus how many started their careers at another school? Out of 68, how many do you think were homegrown of 68?
I think I know the stat. Was it
Oh.
43 transfers?
Oh,
was that right?
Do you have a college football show also
I do.
that you
yeah,
do?
Ross
Is that how
Ellen did that stat. Yeah.
Oh,
43.
so I guess I could have just I'm writing stuff down. I have the legal pad out, and I just could have listened to Ross.
If you've ever listened to the
Thanks.
College Football Inquirer, I would double check our math at all times. But yes,
that is correct.
Amazing number though, and I think it's 30 something are in their first year.
So it's 25 homegrown, 43 transfers, 37% homegrown. In the top 25, though, the preseason top 25, it's 14 homegrown versus 11 transfers. So that's 56% homegrown. So like the better programs, there are still a decent amount of those, Dan, trying to hold on. But the thing about this, and I think we've taken it for granted and made a lot of assumptions about transfer quarterbacks, right? Because it's so normal now. But when you look at the teams that finish in the top 10 in the final college football playoff rankings the last 2 years, and we're still new into this world, there's only 2 teams that finished in the top 10 that had a first-year transfer who was their starting quarterback. And one of those was Adrian Martinez at Kansas State a couple years ago, who got hurt, and then Will Howard took over. And the other one was Caleb Williams, who was technically a transfer, but he was not a Lincoln Riley transfer. So that's not the same thing as this stuff. A lot of the other success, right? It's like Michael Penix in year 2, and going back to Joe Burrow in year 2, and Bo Nix in year 2. We really haven't had the immediate transfer, bang, my team is awesome right away, and I just got here. But there are a lot of teams this year, Dan, when you have 43 out of 68 that are playing transfers at all. There's a lot of first-year guys. Should we have any more apprehension about Ohio State and Will Howard, or Oregon and Dylan Gabriel, and Miami and Cam Ward, or anybody that's playing a first-year transfer quarterback? Or is this just the way it is? Plug them in, go win.
I think that the three most interesting things of this season in college football is the playoff. Obviously, the 12-team playoff changes the scope of way the game is, the sport is competed. The other is the conference realignment. We got all these teams all over the place, right? But the one on the field is this, exactly what you just said. We don't know in this era how is the best way to build a team. And the 2 you just mentioned, Oregon with Dylan Gabriel, Ohio State with Will Howard, they had ready-built teams that were stacked elsewhere, national title contenders, absolute Final Four type. We should be a Final Four team at the very least. And they said, we're going to go with the first-year transfer, particularly Ohio State. By sending Kyle McCord off to Syracuse. They could have said, we're going to develop with him. Instead, they say, we're going Will Howard. Okay. Is that going to be the better route? No idea. I think it might even work for Will Howard in Ohio State, but not be the best way statistically going forward in the long haul for everyone, right? Because we can have little blips here and there. You might say, okay, this worked out great. Miami's a little different. They were trying to kind of get their footing. Cam Ward looked brilliant, by the way, in the first week. But Ohio State and Oregon kind of went all in on this stuff. And this is it. The first year guys, what I'm interested in. Quinn Ewers is a transfer, right? Yeah, but he's been there 2.5, 3 years. I don't know, whatever it's been. He's been there.
Right.
Penix, Bo Nix, those guys were transfers, but they had that second year. How do you develop? I know it's not the North, but USC, you saw it on Sunday night. Miller Moss, their quarterback, had been there 3 years. They finished last, and he's behind Caleb Williams. Okay, fine. It's number 1 pick in the draft. USC finishes their season last year, and Lincoln Riley comes up and gives a press conference and said, we're going to try to get 2 transfer quarterbacks in here. And then they play the Holiday Bowl, and Miller Moss shows out.
Yep.
And all of a sudden he says, all right, we don't need a transfer. But they've developed that guy. And maybe it's the kid that you have that's coming along that's going to be better than what you can get, the shiny object out. I don't know. It's the most important position on the field. It's the one that requires the most interaction with the most other players, right? And you're throwing someone in there and hoping, they got all spring and they got summer and all that, but does it work, or do you need that extra time? I'm fascinated to find out how this is going to play out. I don't think we're going to know after 1 year, because they could be all successes, they could be all failures. But over the next 10 years, how do you build a champion in this era, which is just starting, where where you have 43 guys?
And it's hard because I don't know that there's going to be a trend, because you can already look right now and see like, well, this seems to work and this seems not to work. And it's the same kind of thing. Because, for instance, Dan, the idea that Michigan did not go and get a transfer quarterback when they have a defense that good, and
right.
I certainly thought they were going to be one of those teams that would do that, maybe even after the spring window, right? Could they still go try to find somebody? And now you sit there with Davis Warren and Alex Orji and Jack Tuttle, and you think, well, why didn't they go get a guy? But yet, Georgia and Carson Beck and Bama and Jalen Milroe and Penn State and Drew Aller and Brady Cook and Mizzou and the young guys at Oklahoma and Tennessee and Kansas State that are playing, Noah Fafita at Arizona and Jalen Daniels at Kansas and Miller Moss, you mentioned, like, there's so many other places where it feels like those have a chance to be success stories that might encourage backups to stay, and B, encourage teams to go the Miller Moss route. But then you look at Michigan and say, I can't believe they didn't get a guy. So I'll be curious to see if there winds up being an answer and winds up being a trend. But the hard thing is, everybody always feels like they're desperate. If you're great, you don't want to throw a year away. If you're in between, you don't want to have a bad year, because now you might be on the hot seat and get fired. It's hard to have some patience. And if you don't have patience, then I think the transfer portal becomes even more attractive, unless we prove that you almost cannot win in year one with a guy, which is why Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel and these guys are really important. But as you said, what would your guess be? Do you think it will come to some sort of conclusion where people will say, yes, live in the portal, or no, don't live in the portal? Do you think 10 years from now we'll have an answer?
I would say no, but it'll depend on the player. Like, the right guy will work. Tom Brady transferred to the Tampa Bay Bucks and immediately won the Super Bowl, right? I don't know if that's ever happened in the NFL. I don't know if you just get a guy, right? I think the Jets are okay to, a second year with Aaron Rodgers, maybe he'll fit in. No, I think he would have fit in last year. So I think it depends. If you can get a guy good enough, the problem is a guy good enough generally doesn't hit the portal. There's other problems with the portal, because I agree with you. Right. Michigan's whole situation was very unusual. I mean, Davis Warren is this incredible story. He's like a leukemia survivor. He was a preferred walk-on. Like, he has just worked his way and somehow is now the starter against Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning. Like, this is crazy, right? Great story. That won't help him against Texas. Maybe he'll play well, maybe he won't. But the transfer portal itself then is a mess, because if you look at Michigan last year, the transfer portal opens, they're going to the playoff. They're trying to win a playoff. They've got the Connor Stallions chaos. They've got Harbaugh suspended for the last 3 games of the regular season. He's leaving. Is he not leaving? Who's going to become the new coach? Like, I think at times the portal, the timing of the portal and the calendar of college football is such a mess.
It is.
That we try to do everything in December. We fire coaches, hire coaches, recruit, and transfer portal all at the same, and play the playoff. That, like, a school like Michigan, I think, was flat-footed and was like, we don't even know what's going on here. We don't even know who's going to be here. And, I was always surprised, like, and I don't know of any insight. Maybe the kid just wants to stay out west, and I don't blame him if he does. But, like, Dante Moore, like, it was like, boy, Dante Moore is going to leave UCLA. He's from Detroit. He's a 5-star QB. Here, keys to the kingdom. They're right there for you. And he doesn't take it. He goes, and he's sitting at Oregon, right? Interesting. I don't know why that is. I'm not saying anything bad, good happened, whatever. It's just you just kind of look basically at how trends work, and you say, okay, this could happen. Didn't happen. But Michigan's in this positions where they kind of have to make this work. I think in the end, though, I think you're going to look at it and it's going to be like, okay, generally you're going to want 2 years. But if you have enough talent surrounding the right player, you're going to take them. But it makes for a fascinating thing. We're seeing, like, I don't know if you saw that Alabama's paying their general manager now $850,000. Like, I think the general manager is going to be a huge position in college football. And these are the kinds of decisions you've got to make where you're like, what are we going to do at QB? And so Ohio State clearly made a decision when they sat there and said, Kyle McCord's not going to be good enough for us. Will Howard's going to be better. And he may be. They may be 100% right. They may not. You just don't know. And these kids are so young and they develop so much month to month, week to week, even game to game. It can be hard to know what the right call is. But these are $1 million decisions, not just how much the players cost, but the coaching staffs.
And I mean, the crazy thing about it, and I was at the recruiting and personnel symposium in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, where this kind of topic and the idea of the importance of that role, we used to call these like recruiting guys. Now they are general managers, because it's free agency, but you don't know who the free agents are. So you have to be looking now to start thinking, like in mid-October, oh, what's our quarterback situation? Do we maybe need somebody next year? If we do need somebody, who might be available? And that idea, it's so complicated. And it is one of those things. I don't know if we're going to, they're certainly talking about in that world with NIL doing things where you sort of turn NIL agreements into contracts, that if you have an NIL agreement, but you leave, now all of a sudden you're not going to get nearly as much money as you did. So is it kind of like a contract and there's more roster certainty? But it's so up in the air. It's very hard to do free agency where you don't know who it's going to be. Oh, now the window's open. And now if you don't act in the first 15 days, you're going to be lost. But this is how you wind up with some odd marriages too, and some that aren't going to work out. Where meanwhile, in year 2, Dan, Hudson Card at Purdue, year 2 as a transfer, I thought looked good on Saturday. Luke Altmaier at Illinois, year 2 as a transfer, I thought looked good on Saturday. There's some guys that when they don't hit right away as a transfer in year 1 all the way, people might give up on them. When here we are, and I had to remind myself, I didn't remember it in the offseason, but that second year of the transfer is where it might be for a lot of teams if you can go about it that way.
Cade McNamara at Iowa. Then I'll go to the other one that had a huge weekend was Notre Dame and Riley Leonard, right?
Yep.
And honestly, at Riley Leonard, I'm like, how is he not there all the time? I mean, the guy plays this gritty, gutty game, and then he's reading Bible verses after and talking about humility. I'm like, this is the most Notre Dame kid I've ever seen. And where were you doing at Duke, right? He was like a 3-star recruit, didn't get offered, but he's a perfect fit for Notre Dame. Like, he looks like the perfect fit for that 1-year thing. And they've done 2 in a row. Sam Hartman did pretty well. And now Riley Leonard could do really well. And they're kind of waiting to CJ Carr develop into something. Is it stopgaps or do you keep doing this? I don't know. But I agree. I think the second-year guy is it's always going to be better the second year. You get established. I think it's with every position. I just think that the portal is really tough. You can hit, and it's like a craps table. You can hit. And you watched Florida State last night that BC manhandled. A year ago, they had a ton of transfers, and it worked. Last night, they have 17. None work. Sometimes, why is this guy coming in? Is he coming for the money? Is he just expecting to be in the pros in 4 months? Is he really bought in on the team? How much does he want to win? How much does he fit in? Is he even trying to be one of the guys? Quarterbacks have to be leaders, right? Or is he in a nice big off-campus apartment because he's got a ton of money and he's just expecting to be the first-round draft pick and I'm out of here? All those things that happen that you kind of need. Michigan won the national title last year. That was a very tight team. And you saw it with McCarthy as their quarterback as one of the guys. Those guys are all in together. Can you do that through a portal? Michigan had a bunch of portal kids, but they had a core. And I think those are just the questions that are going to be really interesting that we didn't get. It makes the game different because in the past, it was just stack recruiting classes up, get tons of talent, your core will form, and you build a culture and get going. It's not as easy to have a culture when you're bringing in 15, 20 transfers and 20, 25 freshmen every single year.
Yeah. I did a little drawing and I want to run through. I'm trying to establish like a Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation game with transfer quarterbacks because some of these connections, the Toledo quarterback transferred to Baylor, the Baylor quarterback transferred to Mississippi State, and the Mississippi State quarterback transferred to Washington. So like, that's crazy. The Oregon State had 2 quarterbacks last year. They're now the starters at Florida State and Michigan State. Michigan State, meanwhile, had a quarterback transfer to Arizona State where he's starting, and they previously had a quarterback transfer to Auburn. It's all over the place, but I'm particularly interested in like north to south and south to north. The idea, Dan, that the 3 starting quarterbacks in the state of Florida right now were all starters in the north previously is like, what is happening with college football? So I want to run through a couple of these, chime in when something makes you shake your head. Cam Ward, Washington State to Miami. DJ Uiagalelei, Oregon State to Florida State. DeQuan Finn, Toledo to Baylor. Talon Green, Boise State to Arkansas. Alan Bowman, Michigan, once upon a time. He was at Texas Tech, then Michigan, now to Oklahoma State. Again, it's like, oh, Michigan, they don't have a quarterback. Two of their guys are starting elsewhere now. Who else do we have going north to south? Graham Mertz, Wisconsin to Florida, never stops being amazing to me. And Peyton Thorne, Michigan State to Auburn, never stops being amazing to me, because you have guys. Very few people at Michigan State and Wisconsin were like, these are the guys. And the SEC was like, bring them on down, Dan. Let's let these guys be the answers here. Some of the north to south transfer is crazy to me.
It gets desperation. Graham Mertz had a moment, right? He had a moment there early in his career, and I think he's still
the first game.
Yeah, first game was big, and it's like, oh my God, Wisconsin's finally got a quarterback, and they had transfer Russell Wilson, right? North Carolina State to Wisconsin was the only other time they've had a really good one. And then you're watching that. DJ Lagway is going to take over that job pretty quick at Florida. Yeah. And then, but here's the thing: that team may not be any good. You want. I don't know if you saw DJ Lagway throw the ball on Saturday in garbage time, but that kid was. Will he be at Florida next year? Right? If you're talking about putting your list together, I'm guessing some contenders are like, we'll take DJ Lagway real quick.
Because that's the thing, because I think you could be better off, right? If you're Billy Napier, if you just play DJ Lagway from the start and acknowledge that it's a rebuilding season, the fans can get behind that. You maybe take some pressure off, but then you feel like, no, I have to win now. And now the idea that you may not get the payoff yourself from the development of a young guy. When I was going through a bunch of these quarterback things, one of the school had in the description and the bio of the quarterback of the future in the bio. And I was like, are you sure? Because if he's too good, he might be the quarterback of the future for somebody else. So that it is so hard with no roster certainty. Does that mean you lead old transfer or you lean young development guy? And for instance, even like the stuff we're talking about with Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon and Will Howard going to Kansas State, everybody knows they had good young quarterbacks behind them. I don't think they got chased out, but the reality of the situation is Oklahoma in year 2 had to play Jackson Arnold, and Kansas State in year 2 had to play Avery Johnson because he's a great young recruit. And if they don't start in year 2, they're going to start looking around. And now you're not going to have them and you're going to lose them. So like the reality of like coaches trying to balance is I don't feel sorry for them, but it is super complicated, is it not? Because I think you still want to develop quarterbacks, but like you don't know if you're going to keep them if you do develop them.
Yeah, and I wonder where this goes with the quarter if you flip it around, right? And I respect the decision to say, look, I'm playing college football for 4 or 5 years, or 9 sometimes, but you know what I mean. And it's a finite window. I want to play, right? I don't want to be Miller Moss and sit for 3 years and then maybe get recruited over again. But you make it. But at the same time, if you wait, you were talking, I can't remember which on that list left Michigan, but
Alan Bowman and Cade McNamara.
Yeah. Well, McNamara kind of lost out to McCarthy. What if he stays? I know there's a lot with McNamara,
but still,
but if he stays, he's back as the starter, or Bowman's the starter, right? Like, you don't know where all of a sudden it's like Michigan needs a QB and we're playing. I hope David, I root for every player, right? So I hope Davis Ward has an incredible season. But I think there's a lot of guys on that list going, boy, I think I'm better than Davis Ward. We'll see. But you sometimes, you jump and you get, I can start here. But it's like, boy, you know what? You are at this big time program. You know who was a exceptional college quarterback? Stetson Bennett. I mean, the guy won 2 titles.
Yeah.
3, is that like a bygone era? 2 years, like what he, and I know they brought in JT Daniels. They tried to do things,
they tried to not start him, and they refused to not be started. Yeah.
But would he have gotten run off when now it's even more prevalent? When more guys are hitting that portal and everyone's sitting there saying, I'll be Georgia's quarterback. How many do you bring in? Well, it turned out Stetson Bennett was good enough to win 2 national titles. But the whole thing now is, I have no idea what the proper plan is. I don't think anyone does. But everyone's going to try to figure it out. It is the most important position on the field, and it will determine, particularly when you get down those final games, generally speaking, who's going to win the national title. You can win a lot of games with an average quarterback if you have everything else, but you're in those final games. You need big time plays from big time playmakers, and we'll see which is which.
I just think I think about some guys of the past. You think about like Lamar Jackson now. Lamar Jackson, what he did at Louisville, the NIL money that everybody in the world would have been throwing at him would have been unbelievable. But
I'm sure Lamar thinks of it too. Yeah, he just would have given him like race horses and
oh my god,
yeah, he would have owned the
bloodlines,
the Secretariat or something like that. He would have been fine.
But then, on the other hand, it's like Alabama a year ago, like didn't know what was happening at quarterback after Bryce Young left. They brought in Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame to try to do that in the portal thing. And then they just wound up playing the guy they had there in Jalen Miller, and it worked out great. So I do want to acknowledge that it does go the other way. We did north to south transfers. We do have some south to north transfers. We want to acknowledge Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma to Oregon. Mm-hmm. Will Rogers, Mississippi State to Washington. Riley Leonard, as we said, Duke to Notre Dame. Tyler Van Dyke, Miami to Wisconsin. Wisconsin has to get off this train as well with the quarterback transfers. Mike Wright, Vanderbilt to Northwestern. That seemed to work out for Northwestern so far. Shedeur Sanders, Jackson State to Colorado. It counts. Hudson Card, Texas to Purdue. Eli Holstein worked out great for Pitt. Alabama to Pitt. Thomas Castellanos, once upon a time, started his career at Central Florida. Now he's at Boston College. Luke Altmaier, Ole Miss to Illinois. But I think maybe, Dan, and I'll let you go with this one. I think maybe potentially the one of the most important guys in this conversation for the future of how this goes is Arch Manning, because the idea that Arch Manning chose Texas when Quinn Ewers was there, is stayed at Texas for a second year after Quinn Ewers said he wasn't going to the NFL. If Arch Manning is able to either, I don't know, A, something happens this year and he plays, or B, he stays at Texas, he doesn't start as the number one recruit in his class until year 3, and then has great success at Texas, and then you throw in Miller Morris and Carson Beck and Jalen Miller and all these guys, maybe we will see a little bit of a swing back to guys staying a little bit more. But if it like blows up and Arch doesn't have the career that people expected, then I think it's going to be like, you can't wait, go seize the day. Because I mean, Arch Manning at Michigan right now, we did offseason trades. I tried to trade Arch Manning to Michigan. Plop him in there. They're off to the races. But in the modern world, it's a little amazing to me to think that he stayed for year 2, knowing Quinn Ewers was back.
Yeah, Arch Manning's a fascinating case. A, family didn't need the money, so that's part of it. B, they know how to get to the NFL. Eli Manning was a redshirt his freshman year at Ole Miss, and the second year played very limited. Got in some garbage time and didn't actually play until his junior year. Peyton obviously played, I think he started as a freshman a few weeks in at Tennessee at a time when freshmen didn't start. But he is somebody a lot of people will look at, because if he makes the pros and follows this path and does it this way, that will help, because you sit there and go, hey, who knows more about getting guys to the NFL than a family that would have then 4 quarterbacks in their family in 3 different generations. And I think the other interesting part, and I know we don't speak of it as much, but this certainly is the case with Miller Moss. He might just like going to the University of Texas. You know, it's like, it's a great school. Miller Moss, like they say, he just loves USC, and he's a kind of cerebral kid and does a lot of different stuff. And it's like, this is my school. I want to be the quarterback at this school, and not just, I want to be a quarterback. And so I don't think Arch is going anywhere. And I think we will see certainly next year when he becomes the quarterback at Texas, but you never know, like DJ Lagway's from Texas too. Maybe he goes back. Who knows? Everybody can move around. I think you're right to always point to the Mannings. Manning's got a lot of juice over him.
That's absolutely. When we come back after the break, we'll be joined by Brent Axe talking about Syracuse, their big game this week at home against Georgia Tech, and how that transfer worked out for them with Kyle McCord going from Ohio State to Syracuse. But first, we'll say goodbye for now to Dan Wetzel. He will be joining us every Tuesday here on Kings of the North. Dan, thanks as always for the insight, man.
Thank you, Doug.
Joined now by Brent Axe of Syracuse.com. Brent, how is everybody in Orange Nation feeling right now?
12-0 ACC champions, Doug. Here we go, baby. Everybody's fired up here in Syracuse. It was interesting. There was so much hype around Fran Brown and what he did in the offseason and the transfers he brought in, and people were just over the moon about this team. And we all saw it on the field. We saw actual football on Saturday, and Kyle McCord certainly lived up to the billing and the hype and the price that he was brought in for at Syracuse. 4 touchdowns and looked the part. The defense certainly needs some work, but it was interesting to see it all come together. And now they set up a pretty interesting week 2 matchup against Georgia Tech here.
Is there a sense that Fran Brown and what he's done so quickly with this program has sort of brought Syracuse football into the modern age with bringing Kyle McCord in as a transfer, both starting offensive tackles or transfers, Zeed Haynes from Georgia at receiver? Like, you know, you have a foundation, but to so very quickly supplement Fadil Diggs on the defensive side of the ball, supplement with guys that they're getting to Syracuse out of the transfer portal. How much energy is it around the idea of like how Fran Brown and the staff are even going about things right now?
No question about it. And it's a stark difference. I knew Dino Babers was done as the coach here when midway through last season, I asked him a question about depth. And his answer at the press conference was, we don't have any depth because it all gets bought away. Like he had a defeatist attitude about the portal and the world that they're in. Whereas Fran comes in, and the minute Kyle McCord's in the portal, he's on a plane in Columbus, Ohio, gets him to come here. You mentioned Diggs. We saw Zeed Haynes, wide receiver from Georgia, make a big catch in the Ohio game. Jackson Meeks, same thing, like immediate contributions. And he's showing receipts. Fran is an ace recruiter. He's rated as the top recruiter in the country by 247 Sports coming in, and that's great. But to essentially recruit transfers that make immediate contributions, he has leaned into that. He has leaned into NIL, and that's the kind of coach you need in college football in 2024.
Does Kyle McCord feel like a drop from the sky kind of thing? Like, again, it took work to get him, and a lot of teams were interested in the portal. But to have, you know, whatever he threw for, 300 plus yards, 4 touchdowns in the opener, this level of quarterback play, I don't know, man. Like, how do Syracuse? I mean, I'm not going to say Donovan McNabb. I'm not going to say who. Why would I say Donovan McNabb? But how good are people feeling about the quarterback play right now?
Well, 2 things. Fran Brown had a great line when he said, "I'm going to send Ryan Day a bottle of champagne for letting Kyle McCord come our way here." I thought that was great. And I'll give you a name, Ryan Nassib. Okay, Ryan Nassib, 10 years ago, actually like 12 years ago now at Syracuse, great consummate pocket passer, set a ton of records, actually ended up in the National Football League for a while. He's a backup primarily in his career there, but that's who McCord reminds me of, because Syracuse has had an Eric Dungy and they had Garrett Schrader recently, but they were primarily known as guys that could use their legs. That's not what Kyle McCord does, right? He is a prototype pocket passer, but Doug, a lot of people have said that. They're like, is this guy really our quarterback? And people are asking me, like, what does he look like in camp? And I'm like, he doesn't miss. Like, he is just, you think of construct prototype quarterback in the lab, pocket passer, pro style offense, which Nixon has brought here to Syracuse. And that's who you get. So for this guy to come out and have a career high, 354 yards, had it not been for a penalty, they took away a 44-yard reception. He would have finished with 382 yards, which would have put him in the top 10 single game all time in Syracuse history, right? So that expectation's been there all season. And if anything, he probably exceeded it in game 1. And everybody's just looking at it like, man, this guy's the real deal.
And then to have Oronde Gadsden back, 10 targets, 7 receptions, 108 yards. Trevor Pena doing what you know he's going to do, 6 receptions for 78. Zeed Haynes, the Georgia guy we mentioned. But Oronde Gadsden, there's a lot of good tight ends in the North, but what a difference maker. And again, like, things just happen sometimes, and it was so tough for Syracuse to not have him last year. But to pair a tight end with that kind of skill with a quarterback like this, come on, Brent. Like, this could be a big time connection, right?
It's incredible. And remember, these guys have known each other for 8 months, and OG couldn't even participate in a lot of spring ball. He focused on blocking. They took it easy with him. It's not like he was out there running routes through springs. Think of the chemistry that he and McCord built over essentially 4 months of actual work in the training camp that they just had. And I'll tell you, Trevor Pena coming back, we heard last year from the coaching staff a lot, different coaching staff, of course, but we heard like, yeah, OG is important, but you guys don't understand. The term I kept hearing was the safety valve that Trevor Pena is, right?
Okay.
He's made that connection with McCord. So you got OG, you got Trevor Pena. We mentioned Haynes and Meeks. If I'm a defensive coordinator, like, do I have enough people to cover everybody that Syracuse is going to throw out there? Not to mention Amari Hatcher and Darryl Gill Jr. and Dan Villari, who's still on this team from last year. So McCord has such a great problem in that he's in that 2 seconds he has to make a decision to throw the ball to, as long as they protect him. And they certainly did in game 1, that he's got a lot of targets to go to. But OG, that guy he could have been a first round pick. He would have been a first 3-round pick if he was healthy last year. If he keeps up the pace now, he could be a first round pick in this upcoming draft.
That is wild. The offensive tackle, Savion Washington from Colorado, Demetrius Weatherspoon from Howard. How did Fran Brown think the offensive line played in week 1?
I think they were pretty good. You know, Big Spoon, as they call him, he got a little dinged up against Ohio. He went to the locker room, came back. Fran Brown said today he's okay, so that's good. Washington, I think it's interesting because he comes from Colorado and Spoon comes from Howard, and you're like, okay, so how is he going to handle that upgrade? Whereas Washington came from Colorado, almost, pack power 4 level for Syracuse. Washington got beat a little bit more than I thought he would, but he's also 6'8", 340. So if you're going to put him on the right side, that's something I think Syracuse will deal with there. But this is going to be an interesting test this week. Georgia Tech's not really known as being a defensive force. I think they finished at the bottom of the ACC in a couple key categories last year, but it's an ACC team. It's Ohio. Hey, God bless them. MAC team came in and gave Syracuse a little bit of a push for a little bit before that offense got cranking here. But I'll be curious to see how Spoon and Washington and just this line itself develops, because in the portal era, it's so hard to get continuity from left to right. And I still think they're working on some things.
We talked about this on our Monday show. This opportunity in week 2 for Syracuse, and it's really about what Georgia Tech did to all of a sudden make this game so much bigger than anybody anticipated. Syracuse is a 3-point underdog at home. The betting lines have 9 teams ahead of Syracuse in the odds to win the ACC. I'm not sure I'd be taking North Carolina or Virginia Tech or some of these teams ahead of Syracuse right now. I've put it out there that I bet my $2 on Syracuse at 60-1 in the preseason to win the ACC. We don't have to talk about winning the ACC in week 2, but we can at least talk about if people are talking about it. Like, is this like where, when you look at the uncertainty in the ACC right now, are there people in Syracuse who are going like, well, is that on people's minds at all? Come on.
Because you just said it. You just said it. The ACC, other than Miami, that looked like a juggernaut in week 1, looks to be open. Clemson got their butts kicked, and Virginia Tech, who I picked to win the ACC, by the way, losing to Vanderbilt. And Syracuse plays Miami in the last game of the year, Doug. That could be for something. Okay? Just saying. I know that's a couple months away, and so much can happen between now and then. But look at it this way. Syracuse plays their first 5 games indoors. 4 in Syracuse, and they play UNLV at Allegiant Stadium. They got a huge matchup against NC State on October 12th. Bye week after that, Pitt on a Thursday night, which Marlo Wax, we found out today, is going to be out 6 weeks for Syracuse. So he could be back for that game. He's a huge linebacker and defensive presence for the Orange. You get Virginia Tech at the Dome. You get Miami at the Dome, right? What Syracuse has to be careful of is what every team does. What's that game where you just kind of stub your own toe? Like they go to Cal in mid-November. That could be a weird road trip they're not used to. Something like that happens. But they're in that mix of 4 or 5 teams that could work their way up, win a couple of key matchups, which I mentioned, and at least be in position to knock on the door for the ACC championship game at the end of the year. I don't think there's any question about it.
Marlo Wax, a big loss well, is this defense going to be good enough, especially without him? Maybe a not great defensive performance in week 1. Will this defense be good enough to allow McCord and Gadsden and everybody else to win them games with the offense?
Well, to me, I think the blessing in disguise for this Georgia Tech game in particular was they played an Ohio team that had a great running back, that had a mobile quarterback in Parker Navarro that got you ready for Haynes King. Haynes King is one of those guys, like, you have to cover him every millisecond or he's going to make something happen. And he's not afraid to put his helmet down and challenge you physically. And I think Syracuse saw a version of that in playing Ohio. Brent Key loves to run the football, as he said after that Florida State game,
yes,
right?
He did.
Run the ball. Where I think you're going to see this game turn into is not a shootout per se, because Georgia Tech's going to try and play time of possession. But I think if Syracuse can, to use the old term, bend but don't break, limit Georgia Tech in the red zone. Syracuse actually limited Ohio in the red zone in 4 opportunities. They held them to field goal attempts, and keep that offense humming. That's the kind of game they want to play. So I think playing Ohio in week 1 is going to benefit Syracuse, as opposed to, you munch on a cupcake and get empty calories, and it doesn't prepare you for the type of team that Georgia Tech is going to come in and be.
Really the only great season of Syracuse football in the last decade plus was the 10-3 season in 2018. Just what is happening right now with Syracuse football? This is one of our main concerns, Brent, on Kings of the North is we just want fans to be happy. We just want fans to be able to enjoy their team. We want to help provide context to that. But how happy are Syracuse fans right now compared to where they have been for much of the last decade or so?
That's the last time they were truly happy. It was year 3 under Dino. They're on the upswing. There was going to be this handing of the baton, right? Eric Dungy engineered that 10-win season, and that team stayed as healthy as I've seen a Syracuse team in the last decade. He hands the baton to Tommy DeVito, right? Of your New York Giants. Hey, Tommy DeVito, right? Exactly. But the offensive line that Syracuse had in that 2019, the 2020 season was, just obviously so much went wrong that year. They actually managed to play 11 football games that year, right? What Syracuse has now is the depth, and they didn't have the portal like they do now. So you got to be fair about this, but they have the depth, the speed, and the size on this team, combined with a guy that can recruit and is embracing the modern ways of football, NIL, the portal, and everything. Whereas Dino Babers just didn't do that. And we started to see a lot of the things that Dino Babers promised, a high-flying offense, they used to call it orange is the new fast, just kind of fall apart in a short period of time. So fans are happy because they have a coach that's engaged in that has put himself in the community and has shown receipts on the players he can bring in. But let's go back to something you mentioned a moment ago. Now you have the first test. Marlo Wax goes down, right? Yeah. So who can you put in there that is going to provide the leadership and the production that he provided? And James Hurd is the name that pops up immediately. He's a transfer that Syracuse brought in from West Virginia, combined with a couple of returning players in Derek McDonald and Anwar Sparrow at linebacker. So now you got to integrate somebody and give him a bigger role right off the bat.
That really is. That's like an underrated part of the transfer portal, because people always talk about losing guys and losing depth in the portal. If you can bring in guys that now your 3rd, your 4th linebackers are maybe better than you thought, that you're building, the 5 or 6 guys on each side of the ball, that if something goes wrong, you have something there. It's a credit to Fran Brown. It's Kyle McCord's a big deal, but to have some portal depth that you can figure out some other things, that's that's program building, not just quarterback plucking. So that's a credit to where Syracuse is.
And Doug, I got to throw this in there too, where I think fans are really happy is Fran has also embraced alumni. It was one of the weirdest things that Dino Babers did. The former players didn't feel welcome around the program. It's not something that Dino really leaned into. And Fran has gotten Syracuse back in a lot of connections that they lost in high school recruiting. Fran is very big in New Jersey, right? He's from Camden, and those New Jersey coaches love him. He's getting Syracuse back in the doors of a lot of recruiting places that they lost, not only under Babers, but some coaches that were there prior to him.
This is great. This is something for Syracuse fans to hold on to in the present and in the future, because sometimes a guy comes in, he has a great reputation as a recruiter, and it takes a while for them to be this aggressive in the portal. And then, I mean, again, the staff that he built, there's a lot of Fran brought from the outside. It seemed like Fran brought a lot of his excitement, right? But it seems like there's a lot of substance to everything they're doing there too. And that is so incredibly important. So this feels like the real deal. And this is a game. This is a great week 2 slate. We keep talking about that. This is a game to absolutely make sure you have on your TV screen at noon on Saturday in the Dome. Georgia Tech coming to Syracuse. Brent Axe, where can the people find you, read you, and listen to you?
Appreciate that. Syracuse.com is the website, and on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Syracuse Sports with Brent Axe. Tune into that.
What a great time to be talking and writing about the Orange.
Oh, it's the best.
Brent, thank you for joining us here on Kings of the North.
Thanks for having me.
So just looking at the polls, coaches' poll is out. Hey, there's 4 SEC teams in the top 5 in the coaches' poll. That seems deserved. Ole Miss did beat Furman. All right. Doug Lesmerises back. Thanks to Brent Axe for that. I think we had to get a little juice about Syracuse. Excited for that game. We're going to have our overrated Southern team of the week here later. You're going to get to see Bill Landis. I know when he's not here, you guys miss him. We'll have the most Bill Landis segment you ever could think of. But another team we want to talk about this week is Notre Dame and what that win meant to the program. And like, we can start thinking about week 14. You start talking about Syracuse, Miami in week 14. It's like, okay, let's talk about week 14. USC, Notre Dame in week 14. Not that they don't have any other games before then, but if USC looks maybe like they've gotten some things straightened out defensively, that could potentially be a huge game at the end of the year for the playoff, because this was a huge win in week 1 over Texas A&M for Notre Dame when it comes to the playoff. And we talked about all that with Matt Fortuna here on Kings of the North. Joined now by Matt Fortuna, host of The Independent, a Notre Dame podcast, where I don't know, did you talk about the game already, Matt? Like, this is redundant now at this point.
We sure did. It was in the wee hours of the morning Sunday. Yes. We figured we'd be going late into the night one way or another, but happy to say the numbers were really good on that episode, because there were a lot of happy Notre Dame fans after they went to the country and put a smile on Doug's face, along with that of all the Notre Dame grads across the country.
Well, congratulations to the Fighting Irish. How big of a game did you think that was in terms of, listen, we all have to make sure we're being smart about analyzing college football now. And I know people in the past love to be like, yeah, team season is over and it's September. That's not how it's going to work anymore. You can glean information, but certainly people have made the point that that was a super important game for Notre Dame as a playoff contender. How would you actually characterize that fact?
No, I think it's as big as it gets, Doug. I mean, it's hard to think back to a time Notre Dame won in that kind of spot on the road. The one that comes to mind for me is 2012 Oklahoma. That was the undefeated regular season in Brian Kelly's 3rd year. And I don't need to remind Notre Dame fans of the 30-year magic with coaches. It pretty much makes or breaks these guys. And Marcus Freeman was well aware of that entering this year. But to win that game on the road, to win it the way they did it, and look at the rest of their schedule. They're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way, with the exception of maybe the finale at USC, who looks a lot better after one game than I thought they would. If they didn't win this game, it wouldn't have been a disaster, because it is a 12-team playoff, but you might not be able to afford to lose another game if you're Notre Dame. I don't know if 10-2 with this year's schedule would get you into the playoff. They're the only power conference team that plays 4 group of 5 teams this year, and 2 of them are the military academies. It's a weak schedule. I mean, Florida State's a marquee home game. That doesn't look as hot as it did coming into the season. It's not the greatest schedule, and there's a big impetus, especially with the veteran defense, to make a playoff run and to perhaps go undefeated. I will say, if you read the Inside Zone, I know our friend Ari Wasserman was saying this after the fact. One of my 3 bold predictions for the entire college football season was Notre Dame's going to be the only power conference undefeated team in the regular season. Because I have Ohio State and Georgia losing at least one game in the regular season, but winning their conference titles. And I think now that the hard part's out of the way, that looks very, very possible.
Interesting. I have none. I have no undefeated teams. Notre Dame's still in an 11-1. We don't have to. As we sit here right now, so you mentioned it's year 3 of Marcus Freeman. We just saw Brian Kelly pound a table and LSU still maybe not be what people want them to be. How do you think Notre Dame fans are viewing that trade at the moment, especially because it felt like, there's a lot of energy around Marcus Freeman early on. I don't know if people were tired of Brian Kelly, but everybody likes new things. But then it maybe felt like people were like, well, you know what? Like Brian Kelly was actually pretty successful here, and Notre Dame made the playoff twice in the 14 playoff era. But are Notre Dame fans like 100-0 right now that they'd rather have Marcus Freeman than Brian Kelly?
After these two results this weekend, absolutely. Now, if the results, both of them were reversed, maybe we're having a slightly different conversation. But look, especially at a school like Notre Dame, and you know Marcus Freeman probably better than most around Notre Dame. I think you covered him as a player.
Yep.
That guy is everything you want in a head coach at a place like Notre Dame 9 months of the year. The question was, how's he going to be on game day? How's he going to be in season? And year one obviously wasn't the smoothest, particularly the home losses to Marshall and Stanford. Last year, they took a step forward, but I still think it was an unsatisfying overall season because I thought there was a chance to get to a New Year's Six bowl game and to perform the way they did on the road at Louisville and Clemson, and to completely blow the Ohio State game like they did was definitely disappointing. But again, year three magic for Notre Dame coaches, 3 years of recruiting. In Freeman's defense, and part of this I'm sure has to do with the personality differences, but Freeman has support from the top down administration wise that Kelly never had. And again, Marcus Freeman is a recruiter. Brian Kelly has never been a recruiter. That's part of it. But Notre Dame is paying big money in the NIL game right now. They're accelerating their transfer process. If you look at who made the biggest plays Saturday night for them, transfer quarterback Riley Leonard hitting Bo Collins, transfer receiver from Clemson. There were transfers all over the field. Rod Hurd came over from Northwestern. A lot of big names from other schools. So there's a top-down kind of belief and cohesion that was there to a certain extent with Brian Kelly. But right now, Marcus Freeman's kind of the old head right there. It's a new athletic director. It's a new president. And everyone seems to be rowing the boat in the same direction. And the question was, can you win those big games when you have all the programmatic elements in place? And they answered the bell with the affirmative in the fourth quarter on Saturday night.
I like coaches who make bold decisions and don't wait forever. I think coaches can be stuck in their ways. And a lot of times you understand why they are, because that's how they got here. They did things a certain way and it was successful. And so people like us or fans are like, you got to change. They don't want to change. Marcus Freeman fired his receivers coach after last year. They have 3 transfer receivers. Jaden Greathouse is back. A move like that, you mentioned Bo Collins, the Clemson transfer, what he did. Wasn't everybody high on Chris Mitchell from FIU in the preseason? That's something where it's like, okay, well, you feel like Notre Dame's going to be pretty good on the offensive line and they have good tight ends and, their defense is usually pretty good. What do you think of the Notre Dame receiver room right now? And what do you think of the way Marcus Freeman addressed it in the offseason, both with changing the coach and the guys they brought in the room? I sort of said, okay, that's like a young coach making hard decisions, man.
Yeah, it's, the numbers won't bear it out from week one, but when you just look on paper, I mean, this is a unit that last year barely had 3 healthy scholarship bodies by the end of the year. I mean, the passing game was just almost non-existent. It was Mitchell Evans before he got hurt, and that was it. And even Marcus Freeman said after the season, when asked about Sam Hartman, he doesn't think Notre Dame did the best, put him in the best position to succeed. Which bear it out. He ended up going undrafted after 6 years of college. I don't think getting 3 grad transfers or 3 transfers at receiver every year is practical. I'm surprised they've recruited at the high school level as well as they have at that position, because it's been pretty bad on the field the last few years when it comes to the pass game. But they're definitely taking steps in the right direction. And I thought they managed the game extremely well Saturday night. I mean, Texas A&M, for all their faults, the last 3 times they've hosted top 10 opponents, they've won. And Notre Dame came into that game as number 7. I think A&M closes a 3-point favorite, which means it was probably equal on a neutral field. And I think going in, I thought Notre Dame was probably the better team. But to be fair to Notre Dame and the odds makers, Notre Dame had not really earned the benefit of the doubt going into this game as far as big moments on the road like this in SEC country. And the environment was rocking, but they played within themselves. And I think having a veteran quarterback like Riley Leonard, say that 0 is okay, not take risky throws, trust that elite defense, and know that those receivers are going to be there to make plays when it mattered most. Marcus Freeman said afterward, let's face it, we all know wide receiver, usually that's the most selfish position on the team. They get frustrated when they don't get the ball. And they were not getting the ball through much of the night, but they made plays when it mattered most. the schedule eases up dramatically moving forward here, they will have more opportunities moving forward. And they were able to rely on those running backs and protect that offensive line. I know that's an ironic statement, but that's an offensive line that historically has been really good, that had just 6 career starts entering this game against a very good defense. And no sacks, which is great to look at in the box score. Not a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination, but they passed and held their own about as well as you can expect in that situation.
So let's just assume Notre Dame's in the playoff, right? You guys are doing that on your show. They're just in. Like, you know,
it's hard to, barring an injury, it's hard to imagine them not making it after Saturday.
So let's jump ahead, because everybody wants to be the team above them. Nobody wants to be who they are. Nobody's ever happy. I suppose it's ambition, right? Ambition is good, but there's a lot of programs. Notre Dame made the playoff twice in the 10 years of the 14 playoff. There's a lot of programs who would kill to have made the playoff twice, but when Notre Dame got there, they didn't really compete. Jumping ahead 3 months and assuming that Notre Dame's in the playoff, like, is this program elevating? Like, is this a program that can be not just a playoff team, but a competitive playoff team? Because I do think, probably Notre Dame fans want that in addition to just getting in. But with Riley Leonard, with a young offensive line, they're always going to play good defense. Like, how good do you think this team can actually be?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the nexus for hiring Marcus Freeman was,
okay.
We know what the floor is with Brian Kelly, and it's really good. And even LSU fans, I saw them on social media last night saying, like, Kelly's elevated the floor of this program, but can he break through and win a national championship like our last two coaches did? I think the ceiling is higher at Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman as the head coach right now because he's recruiting a lot better. And you saw that difference in the fourth quarter on Saturday night. I mean, I put this out there. I cannot remember the last time I saw Notre Dame play a team from that part of the country and have better athletes. I mean, even when they would play, say, Louisville.
Let's rephrase that. The North had better athletes than the South.
Correct.
Let's not put punches in that part of the country. Call them out. The North had better athletes than the South, says Matt Fortuna.
Well, I mentioned Louisville. Louisville goes back and forth. Sometimes they want to be Northern. Sometimes they want to be Southern. But even Louisville, when Notre Dame played there in 19, Notre Dame won. It was Scott Satterfield's first game. But I remember talking to some people on Notre Dame staff who were like, I still can't believe Louisville's faster than us. They weren't ready to beat us, but they were faster than us. And to go into Texas A&M and win and have 2 big plays, 2 big long touchdown runs that ended up being the difference. They held A&M without a play of 20 yards, which was very, very impressive. They were very, very sound in tackling. Notre Dame has one of the best secondaries in the country, which, again, is something you can never say about this program, going back to the Brian Kelly era. I think the ceiling for this team has certainly been elevated. And I think the 12-team playoff is the best thing to happen to them because you had to go undefeated to make the 14 playoff if you're Notre Dame. And that's hard to do. I don't care how good you are.
It's hard
to go undefeated every year. And Brian Kelly, to his credit, by the end there, was winning all the games you were supposed to win and notching a few upsets here and there and would get them into the playoff or at least in playoff contention in most years. This year in particular is really unique for Notre Dame because, again, I think the schedule sets up where they absolutely should make the playoff after winning on Saturday. They probably should go 12-0. But either way, if you go 12-0 or 11-1, if you're the 5 seed, you don't get that bye. But you're also off on conference championship weekend. And if you're the 5 seed, you're going to have a home playoff game against the 12 seed, which is going to be what? Boise State, Liberty. It's going to be a group of 5 team, a game you're absolutely going to win at home. Like, no excuse if you don't. You win that, you play the 4 seed in a neutral site. Well, the 3 and 4 seed this year are going to be the ACC and the Big 12 champion. And based on what we've seen from the ACC outside of Miami after 1 week, I don't think anyone's curling up in a ball saying, oh, no, we can't face these guys. Big 12, we'll see. Either way, I think you take your chances if you're Notre Dame, even though you're not eligible for a bye. So I think there's a path there where, okay, 2 playoff wins. Now you're in the semis. Yes, that's what Brian Kelly did in the past. You're probably going to face an Ohio State or Georgia, a team that's definitely more talented than you. What's that going to look like? I don't know. I think the other part, and I mentioned this in my column today on the Inside Zone, Marcus Freeman kept talking about culture fit when it came to grad transfers and how you can't just go out and bid and bring in the best rated guy. You need to make sure these guys fit in with this program. I know that's a buzzword that gets overused in college athletics every single day, but I do wonder, at least initially, as we dip our toes in this 12-team playoff era, you know how hard it's going to be to keep some of these teams and rosters intact for as many as 17 games? I mean, think about the calendar. Think about when the portal opens. Think about when coaches leave. You're telling me if when Florida fires Billy Napier and they're going after either Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz and both those teams are in a playoff race, they're not going to be a little distracted? You're telling me backups on these playoff teams are not going to have agents and schools in their ear saying, come here, come here, come here? I think Michigan, at least on the field last year, proved the importance of having depth and having a good football program culture. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a team or two make a run to the semis or maybe even national title game by simply being deeper and having their stuff together, because I don't think anyone's prepared for how this thing's going to unfold.
I have Notre Dame in the semis based on that exact path as a 5 seed, beating the 12 and beating the ACC champ as the 4 and getting to the semifinals, which again, by any standard, even though maybe it did not fulfill Notre Dame fans in the past, by any standard, we would be incredibly successful. And then we usher in the CJ Carr era. That dude's going to be good.
He will be very good. They're very excited about him. Yeah. And again, you got to remember, it's just Freeman's 3rd year, and he's 38 years old. I mean, 10 wins was, I wouldn't call it a milestone, but it was like, okay, he's showing progress. He knows what he's doing. You make a playoff run in year 3, the recruiting benefits of that are going to be enormous.
Absolutely. Matt Fortuna, when people want to listen to you, want to read you, how can they do that?
You can listen to me and Pete Sampson on the Independent Podcast, the Notre Dame Focus podcast. We record post-game every weekend, and we have a midweek show as well. And you can subscribe to my written work on the Inside Zone at InsideZoneMF.com. Thanks for having me. I'm a fan of the show. I thought I'd get Brohio, not this Doug Lesmerises guy, but it's been fun to listen and watch so far this season.
I have so many costumes and stuff. I'll show you my sword. That's all. I'll show you my sword since I didn't dress up as Brohio.
Was that for today. USC last night, or
it's for Kings of the North, brother? Come on, watch out.
Of course,
I got a sword because I'm on King. So Matt Fortuna, it's going to be an interesting year, and we appreciate you giving us some of your Notre Dame knowledge here on Kings of the North.
Thanks, Doug.
By request, partial bro of the North for Matt. News, Dante Corleone, the great defensive lineman for Cincinnati, who was sidelined with blood clots in the summer. When I was at Cincinnati camp in the preseason, they said then they were expecting him back this season. He is back at practice, Cincinnati announced on Tuesday. They will monitor him and see how he does this week. It is possible that he will play Saturday against Pitt, a game where I will be in attendance watching the Bearcats and the Panthers. Man, Brendan Sorsby and Eli Holstein, let's get after it, man. Let's get after it on Saturday. Again, a great slate coming up on Saturday. We're trying to preview a bunch of these games. We do a big game preview on Thursday. We're going to probably do one on Wednesday. We might do 2 on Thursday. We want to talk about Syracuse now. A big game coming up, on a couple big games on Friday night. So there's a lot going on, and we want to make sure that we cover all of it. So thanks to Matt Fortuna. Fortuna, if you're watching, you better talk about Kings of the North on your show the way that we talked about your show here, right? We're all friends here in the North, and we just want to support each other. When we come back, we still have a Northwestern discussion ahead. I still have my overrated Southern team of the week ahead, but coming out of the break, you'll get a little Landis in your life, which I know you guys all want here on Tuesday. All next on Kings of the North.
Is here with your Kings of the North block and punt of the week. And when we set out to do the block of the week here on Kings of the North, I wanted it to be a way to showcase some offensive line play for many of our 28 teams, guys who don't get enough attention usually throughout the course of the season. And we will definitely do that with block of the week moving forward, but we are not doing that this week because the person that stood out to me most from a blocking standpoint was in fact a Rutgers defender. Yes, we're talking about Kaj Sanders. He's a freshman safety for the Scarlet Knights, earned the start against Howard last week in place of injured normal starter Flip Dixon in the back end of Rutgers secondary. Played quite well against Howard, but it was a play he made during an interception return that jumped out to me and earned Kaj the nod for block of the week. Check out this play. Here's a play. Howard's quarterback drops back to pass. It's a really bad throw. Great interception there. Just watch Koch come flying into focus. There he is down the field looking for Howard's quarterback. Finds him, puts him in the dirt, creates a lane for the touchdown. Another view of it here from more of a side angle. Koch isn't even in the screen yet. Where is he? Oh, there he is. Breaking the new land speed record. Trying to find somebody to put in the ground to spring this touchdown. One more time. There he is in his back pedal. He's the fastest man on the field. Look at him. He's the fastest man on the field. He's got nothing but eyes on the quarterback, looking for work, and he finds it to help set up the TD. Man, what an effort by Kaj on that play. It's incredible stuff from a freshman. Hopefully that sets the stage for a really long, productive career for him. And what a great opportunity for any defender to get the quarterback in your sights like that and be able to just put him in the ground while your teammate scores a touchdown. I bet that had to feel fantastic. Moving now to punt of the week, we are going with Michigan State's Ryan Eckley. Had a busy week, had 6 punts. The Michigan State's game against Florida Atlantic last Friday night. Ryan Eckley punted a lot last year. If things continue with what we saw from Michigan State's offense in the opener, and I could see him punting a lot this year. He's very good. He was our preseason all-North punter. We'll see him being in that conversation all year long. He'll have some competition, but he had a pretty good week 1, and he had a fantastic punt that actually led to some points for Michigan State in its game against FAU. Let's run the clip. Here it is. Ryan Eckley from a standstill position just really pooches that thing down there, gets it to sit nicely around the 6, and just watch that thing roll. Shout out to receiver Alante Brown, by the way. He's the guy down there who downs the pump. But just look at the confidence in Eckley. He knows he's placing this thing inside the 5 at worst, and he gets the roll because he's a craftsman all the way down to the 1. Michigan State got a safety soon after this. So there you have it, our block and punt of the week inaugural edition here on Kings of the North. Congrats to Kaj Sanders. I know it's a huge career milestone for you, young man. I don't know if you'll ever top it, winning block of the week. I hope you do. It'll be tough. And congrats to Ryan Eckley, one of the best punters, not only in the North, but in all of college football for a stellar debut. We'll be back next week with more blocks and more punts on Kings of the North.
It's like it's 2 different shows. Landis comes on like he's on NPR and he calls punters craftsmen. And now I'm going to get on here and scream about Brian Kelly and pound the table. Man, how good is that? We're going to do that every week. It's like as soon as we started the show, we were like, Landis needs to have a punt and a block of the week. I didn't know he was going to do NPR voice, but so good. And he there's nothing he would rather do in the world. And it gives you a little taste of Bill Landis here on a Tuesday. All right. My weekly Tuesday segment is Overrated Southern Team of the Week. I should put on my Georgia hat for this, even though it is not Georgia this week. It is LSU. And I might just pound the table every time I say LSU for the rest of the season because Brian Kelly pounded the table after their loss to USC on Sunday night. Here's the thing about LSU. Matt Fortuna talked about this. They think that if LSU thinks that Brian Kelly is a floor raiser, I don't know if LSU wants a floor raise because LSU is unique. People intersperse the word unique and rare because unique means singular, one, and rare just means not that often. I do think LSU is unique. That there is no other college program like this with the peaks and the valleys. Since 2003, LSU has 3 national titles and 9 years where they finished outside of the top 12 at the end of the year. Now, it's not like the outside the top 12 is terrible, but if you're outside the top 12 in the final AP poll, you're just not really in the mix. That would be outside the playoff. Right in the modern world. So, and they were 12th in the preseason poll with that loss. In the coaches poll, they dropped to 19th. They dropped 7 spots. The coaches poll is out this week on Tuesday. So that whole thing is, if you're LSU, I want my team to be in the mix. I think being in the mix is fun because it gives you a whole fall of possibility. When you are 21 years, 3 national titles, that's an unbelievable peak. That the only team that's peaked like that is Bama. 3 titles in 21 years is great, but 9 years out of the top 12, that's almost half the time where you're not really competing in the same way at the very, very, very top of the sport. For instance, as a comparison, and just in my career, this has been a comparison that's come up a lot. Ohio State since 2003, now it's right after their 02 title, but since 2003, Ohio State has 1 title compared to 3 for LSU. So you'd take LSU. But Ohio State has finished outside of the top 12 twice since 2003. And one of them was their disastrous, everybody suspended, Luke Fickell's the interim coach, 2011 season. The other's 2004, where they went 8-4. other, like Ohio State's always in the mix, but they don't have the titles that LSU does. LSU is out of the mix a lot, but they have 3 peaks. So what do you want? You hired a floor raiser from the North, and now you're going to be mad that you're not in the national title mix. The whole thing, we just talked about this with Matt Fortuna. The whole thing with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame was, is he going to get you over the top? He raised the floor. He got you in. But is he going to get you over the top? You did this to yourself, LSU. So, like, let's not have anybody be mad now, and let's not have anybody be shocked if LSU's not in the national title mix, because maybe he'll be in it 1 time out of 8. But the rest of the time, there might be some clunky seasons in there. It's the LSU way. So you don't get everything. You don't get to be consistent and get the peaks necessarily, unless you're Bama, right? So just chill out and just accept it. Let's not be shocked if LSU's not great. It's like, okay, there's a lot of times when LSU is not competing at the top of the sport. And then every now and then Joe Burrow shows up. Every now and then Glenn Dorsey shows up. Right? And then you get to do that. Sometimes your coach is Nick Saban. So they did it last time. They come to the North. They come and get us, don't they? They come and they get us. If I ever end up hosting a show in the South, come get me. Come save me. If I end up hosting a show in the South, or at least a Southern show, I've been kidnapped. So we can get a safe word right now. It's like one of those things. If like somebody calls you on the phone and you say, you have like a weird thing that you're going to say that the person calling would know. If you ever call me up and I say the North can cram it, call the police. I've been kidnapped by the South because they needed a better show host. Okay. You got to be there for me. Okay. That's the overrated Southern team of the week, brought to you by the South, who can collectively cram it. Now we're going to talk about Northwestern. They're not Southern. They're of the North, and they have a new, small, interesting stadium. They also have a game on Friday night. 3 Northern games on Friday night, and we just want to make you guys aware of this. We had the crazy schedule in the first week. We played games on Thursday. We played games on Friday. We played games on Monday. We have 3 Northern games. What are our 3 Northern games, Mike? Oh, yes. We have Indiana is home at 7 p.m. on the Big Ten Network against Western Illinois, if you want to pop that on. Also at 7, this is actually a pretty good game. BYU at SMU. This is a game where, like, people think the ACC, but they've always thought it was up for grabs. Landis has been very intrigued by SMU and the ACC, but then SMU almost lost his first game to Nevada. So I don't know about this, but BYU looked pretty good in the opener. That's also at 7. And then 9 p.m., Duke at Northwestern on FS1. If you didn't watch the Wildcats beat Miami, this will be a chance with no other games in competition to maybe get eyes on this stadium. I didn't really get eyes on the stadium, and I wanted to know about it. So we went to our good friend, Matt Shelton, to talk about the defense Northwestern played on Saturday, what the stadium is like, and what this scene should be against Duke on Friday. Here's Matt Shelton on KOTN. Now by Matt Shelton of Wildcat Report. Back to the show here on Kings of the North. Matt, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we need a description. Like what? There were 12,000 people in this place at Northwestern on Saturday, the new temporary stadium on the lake. What did it feel like? Did it feel like a college football game, or did it feel like something a little bit different?
I think it felt a little more special for the first one. I think maybe a little more normalcy or something close to it will set in later in the year, but it definitely felt really really unique and different. You know, I would say there was more of an intensity and environment there in that game than there were for some of the home games last season. Like I would say there was more of a home field advantage against Miami on Saturday than against, say, Maryland at Ryan Field last year. But it really was a special environment.
That was one of the main things I was curious about in trying to evaluate Northwestern this year, is how much of a home field advantage it might be for them, especially when you get to some of the Big Ten games like Indiana and Wisconsin. Do you think it can be a true edge for the Wildcats, especially as they get more accustomed to it and everybody else coming in here is going to be like, what?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it'd be the same as, you know, when you have a program like Wisconsin, a tough road game for them is, you know, you're playing at the Big House, you're playing at Happy Valley, at the Horseshoe. You know, it's not going to be that, but I think there's a definite edge there, and it's an environment and a situation where Northwestern fans understand that now is the time for them to kind of push their chips in and really get a chance to experience something special in a way that there really wasn't maybe in the past few years at the old Ryan Field. So I think they definitely will have more of an edge, certainly more than any of the other options that were being considered. I mean, it maybe wasn't pretty. They beat Miami 13-6. You know, if you're playing that game at Soldier Field, if you're playing that game at SeatGeek Stadium, I don't know if Northwestern wins. So
interesting.
Through one game,
that's a lot.
It's done its job. Absolutely.
Yeah, that says a lot. They can't do once. I mean, it's not like Wisconsin's this week, but when Wisconsin gets there, make sure nobody does jump around, because would the stadium still be standing if people did jump around?
It's built to stand up to the lake winds. So
okay,
I think it can hopefully handle a few jumps.
Okay. Was it windy? Like, do you feel extra wind? And if you get an actual windy day, is it possible that the wind would affect? I mean, I was at a game 2 years ago, Ohio State at Northwestern, where like the ball was blowing sideways on every play. So we've had that before in Evanston. How much could wind be a factor though when your stadium is right on the lake?
Yeah, it could be a really big factor. It wasn't a big deal on Saturday. It was, I don't have the exact miles per hour, but it was light breeze basically still. I don't know if I'm sure there's a number somewhere of if it got super severe that they probably would have to make an adjustment, but I don't think that's any different than any other lakeside stadium. I'm sure that there's a number that they have of where if winds get so high, you got to take a break or take a pause or whatever. But I think if the Ohio State situation you mentioned was definitely an outlier. I mean, Northwestern was not good that season, and CJ Stroud scored 21 points. So that was one heck of a win. So if that win shows up, it'll be a mess again. But it was a really beautiful day, a little hot, but really great environment and really great game.
All right, let's talk about the ball holding Miami to 6. I mean, this is Miami that might win the MAC. How good do you think this Northwestern defense is and could be?
It was a really, really impressive performance. You know, they have a new defensive coordinator, kind of almost in name only. You know, you have Tim McGarrigle taking over the job. He's a wealth of institutional knowledge. He was a huge factor in Braun's defense last year, but still a new guy with the play sheet. So there was still, I don't know if nerves is the right word, but a curiosity to see how it would go. And you really can't draw it up better than that. I think there's a chance that this defense is at a really, really high level, especially by Northwestern standards. I mean, the offense had some serious growing pains, and the defense said, take as long as you want. You're fine. You know, they came up with clutch interception after clutch interception. They held Miami to 40 true rushing yards. I mean, and again, it's not, they have Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule later this year. I don't think the numbers will be replicated then, but Miami's not Little Sisters of the Poor right now. That's a real team from the MAC, and Northwestern erased them off the field.
We know Tim McGarrigle, as you said, is the DC now, but David Braun's a defensive coach, came to Northwestern to be the defensive coordinator under Pat Fitzgerald, and everything exploded, and David Braun becomes a head coach. Is Braun pretty good at this? In year one, he held the program together and won 8 games and beat Utah in a bowl game. But now we're just talking ball stuff. How good of a coach is David Braun, do you think?
I think it's a big game against Duke on Friday, but we're turning towards the territory of pretty good. You know, I was writing our press conference summary a few minutes ago and was talking about the Duke game, which he's talked about as a major turning point where they got kind of run off the field in their own right back when Duke had Riley Leonard and Mike Elko. They lost 38-14. Northwestern's 8-3 since then.
Yeah.
In 11 games. And that's pretty much all conference games. And again, a Utah in a bowl game and a Miami, Ohio team that's no slouch. And they're doing pretty well when you break it down like that. So if they can beat Duke this week, there's some real momentum and maybe some real realization that they've really found something here.
Yeah. So the students are still not back in session yet. Is that right? So there won't be students there Friday night. What do you think? But it was a sellout Saturday. This is a Friday night game, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Northwestern time. What do you think this game will be like at night? And are you expecting like the crowd will be into it again?
I do. I don't know if I don't think they've announced a sellout. I don't know what the ticket numbers are yet, but one of the things that Deputy Athletic Director for, I think it's engagement. Sorry, apologies to Jesse. Jesse Marks talked about during the construction process was that part of the situation is that they have not just permanent lights for the game, but they have serious high quality show lights. They're ready to put on an experience for the fans who show up to a night game. So they're, like I said, they're ready to really showcase what the facility can do. It's not just grit, spit, and duct tape. That they put some time and effort into this thing, and they're going to be able to give fans a good time. And I think they're really excited to show what it looks like on. It's also a national TV game. It's on FS1, so I think they're really excited to show what that looks like.
Malik Murphy, who when he had to play at Texas last year when Quinn Ewers was hurt, like Malik Murphy looked like a dude. And it's one of those things, whenever you have a backup quarterback who plays, it's like, I wonder where he'll transfer to next year. He wound up at Duke. In their opener against Elon, he was 26 of 40 for 291 and 2 touchdowns. I think he has a chance to be really good. Like, this is a kind of a next level kind of test for this Northwestern defense, right? Against a quarterback like that.
Yeah, I think if there's one asterisk on how much success Northwestern's had, it's that high quality quarterback play has been few and far between. A lot of times they're able to lock in, fall back, say, we're going to key in on the run, and we're going to make you beat us with your arm and high quality decision making. There are a lot of Big Ten quarterbacks that can't do that, and even a high quality MAC quarterback, in Brett Gabbert didn't do that last week. But one game where that really was exposed was when they played Illinois last week, and all of a sudden Casey Washington and Luke Altmaier were, or I don't think it was Altmaier, I think it was Paddock at that point.
Oh, Paddock, yeah.
But all of a sudden there were 43 points on the board, and it was like, whoa, where did that come from? That's kind of has been the Achilles heel a little bit. If you have someone who can stop, who can drop back and deliver, that's been a little bit of a struggle for him. So I think this is a huge inflection point for them. If they can deliver, if they can beat Duke, snap a 5-game losing streak in the series, that's a huge statement. And this starts to become a real season with real expectations.
Offensively, for Northwestern, Cam Porter, 13 rushes, 63 against Miami of Ohio. Bryce Kurt, 6 catches, 91. But Mike Wright's the guy everybody wanted to get eyeballs on, the transfer quarterback from Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. 18 of 30 for 178. He had 9 rushes for 65 yards and a touchdown. Did have 2 fumbles. How do you describe Mike Wright as a quarterback? And do you think that the fans got the team got the full Mike Wright experience in week 1, or is he going to be a very different quarterback by the middle and end of the year?
I think it's a work in progress. I think the good news is that they got a win, and I think Mike would tell you himself that was not the full Mike Wright experience. There's a miscommunication on a snap. That was the first fumble. Snap caught him off guard, and Miami fell on it. Then the other one went under center on a QB sneak and bad exchange. And then in the scrum, Miami came in with the ball. I mean, he played that one off. He said he was too excited at the prospect of scoring a touchdown. But I really think, he showed in terms of ability to deliver and operate. The first 2 drives in the second half looked really strong. And that was when Northwestern kind of, again, in the wonderful world of the ex-Big Ten West, when they got up 13-3 and put the game away, that drive, he really showed like he can execute this offense. So if that Mike Wright comes out for the rest of the season, again, you're looking at another bowl appearance. If the first half one comes out, it's going to be a struggle. So I think he's still a question mark, but there's no doubt he finished the game on an upward trajectory. And especially his ability to create with his legs is not something that's been at Northwestern in a long time. on the touchdown drive, he scrambled, basically invented his own RPO and pulled the DB off a tight end, threw it for 25 yards, and then scrambled in the next touchdown. He iced the game by keeping it on a read option, scrambling for the first down, running out the clock. So he brings a lot more to the table in that respect than a Northwestern quarterback has in a long time. And again, I think not necessarily popping champagne after scoring 13 points, but the trajectory is still up.
Okay. He's Matt Shelton of Wildcat Report. Matt, right? WildcatReport.com. Is that the best way for people to find you?
Yes, it's actually northwestern.rivals.com.
Northwestern.rivals.com. Matt does a great job. And I think this is a good one Friday night. If you guys aren't doing anything, this would be one to tune into. I'm sure like the TV broadcast is probably going to go nuts again, like with the stadium and what the deal is. And it's a very unique situation. And like, you know, people need to get a vibe for this, man, right? It's 2 years of it. So it's not a once in a lifetime experience. It's going to be like an 8 or 9 times in a lifetime experience between this year and next year. But it's something different at Northwestern. And I think people should check it out. Matt, thank you for joining us. And thanks as always for your time here on Kings of the North.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so thanks to all of our guests today. News a little bit, because as we do this on Tuesday, some of the coaches have their news conferences. Matt Campbell at Iowa State said that Caleb Bacon, their great linebacker, did have surgery and is out for a while. He said he has a chance to be back before the end of the year, but coming off, got hurt in the first quarter on Saturday. I think people expected that Caleb Bacon would be out for a while, but this is the confirmation, and it's tough news for him and for the Iowa State defense, and makes Cy-Hawk on Saturday just a little bit more difficult. Again, great slate. We will have on Wednesday, though, we are going all in with the Michigan show because we have to address the fact that there are some people who think that we are anti-Michigan, and we will talk about that. We will talk about that head on, and then we will do our big game breakdown version of Michigan, Texas on the Wednesday show. And then for those of you who enjoy sampling National College Football podcasts, Stephen Godfrey of Split Zone Duo will stop by and join us. And he and I will talk about Texas and Michigan from a big picture standpoint. So this will be a Michigan focused show on Wednesday, but I think everybody has opinions on Michigan right now. So it's not only for Michigan fans. We really want to talk about how everybody should view Michigan and how Bill and I view Michigan, and then how we think this game will break down on Saturday. And then that means on Thursday, when we do our picks and our previews for all the Northern games, we can do some big game preview stuff with a couple other games on Thursday, because there's other games, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Iowa State, that deserve our attention like that. I did want to double back and just give you this. 28 Northern teams, starting quarterbacks, week 1. 13 of them were new transfers joining the team this year. 7 were players who had transferred previously but did not start their careers at the school. 8 were homegrown. So the only 8 homegrown quarterbacks, and the flags, the banners today, I gave a nod to the homegrowns. So Iowa State, Boston College, Tommy Castellanos is not technically homegrown, but they beat Florida State. Come on. Billy Edwards, right? So that's who's in the bottom row here. The homegrown Northern quarterbacks: Rocco Becht at Iowa State, Avery Johnson's at Kansas State, Garrett Green at West Virginia, Jalen Daniels at Kansas. Those are sort of like the big 4 guys who've always been there in the Big 12. Dylan Raiola, the true freshman at Nebraska, Drew Aller at Penn State, Billy Edwards. They brought in MJ Morris at Maryland to compete for the job, but Billy Edwards won it. And then Michigan with Davis Warren and Alex Orji, all those guys. So it's unusual. 8 out of 28 homegrown quarterbacks. We know where the sport is going, but I think it's interesting sometimes to get your head around those. The 13 Northern teams starting brand new guys, new to the program this year: Syracuse, Oregon, Ohio State, Washington, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Rutgers, Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Pitt, and Michigan State. Wild. Glad we talked about that with Dan Wetzel. Glad you guys are here with us. If you've been here, unbelievable. If you're new, welcome. Thanks for trying it. Subscribe, give us a like, tell a friend. We're growing. We see the comments that people are excited that we're up over 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, which happened very quickly for us. And we're super excited about that. And what blows my mind is that you guys care about that there are people who want this audience and want this show and want this idea and want the North and Northern college football to grow. So that you're riding with us means so much. Bill Landis back on Wednesday. For now, thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorstowski. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.